Hello, Barry Island Primary School and Miss Hicks.
Hello!
For those of you who haven't met me, I'm Mr. Nelson and I work at the Wales Coastal Monitoring Centre. You know, from my recent visit to your class, you've nearly completed our education programme on coasts and climate change. I'm amazed how brilliant you've all been, engaging in the programme and asking very intelligent questions. I see some future coastal and climate scientists among you. I'm here to introduce our very special guest, Dr. Nicola Rimington, who is a coastal scientist for a government body called Natural Resources Wales. Dr. Rimington, would you like to introduce yourself and tell the class a bit about what you do?
Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, so I work for Natural Resources Wales, and we have a huge role in helping to sort of manage and protect the environment of Wales and make it a nice place for people to live and work now and in the future. My particular role is focused on coastal management. So that means that when we're making decisions about management of the coast, we need to think about the environment, we need to think about people, we need to think about how much things cost, and we need to think about climate change to make sure that our decisions are sustainable for the future. So I think that's enough about me. I'd be ready for the first question if you've got one.
We've been looking at coastal flood defences this week. Where's the most money being spent in Wales to protect people from floods?
That is a great question, and one that is really difficult to answer, actually. But a good example, I think, is a scheme that was delivered at a low-lying town on the West Wales coast called Borth, just north of Aberystwyth. And there was a mixture of defence structures that were put in place, and some shingle was brought in to help break the wave energy, and that scheme cost about £13 million. You quite often find that coastal defence schemes cost of the order of several £1 million. It's really, really expensive and really important that we do the right things to make the best of that money. Thank you. Next question.
Last week we made our own weather stations and looked at weather forecasts. We noticed that you have flood forecasts on your website. What is a flood forecast and how does it work?
Oh, another good question. Okay, so flood forecasts can be quite complicated technical things, but basically we would gather information from the Met Office who do the weather forecasts, from our own models that we run around predicting flooding, and we take data from tide gauges which measure the water levels in the sea, and also gauges that measure river levels, and we put that information all together and look at whether we think a flood event might occur. So that's what informs, you know, that is a part of the information that informs a flood forecast. And then if we think that you know, a flooding event might occur, that would then lead us to make a decision to send out flood alerts or flood warnings to warn those people that might be affected by the flooding. So quite a complicated thing to pull together with lots of information and computer modelling and maths involved, but really, really important. Brilliant. Next question.
What should we do before, during and after a flood to protect buildings and people?
Oh gosh, okay, so before a flood event occurs, it's really important to think about your risk and to be prepared. So do you know whether you live in an area that's flooded before or is at flood risk? So you can look at NRW's website to understand a bit about that, for example. If you know that you might be at flood risk, can you think about how you store your really precious things, you know, your favourite photographs, your teddy bear, your gift that you brought back from your best holiday ever? You know, are they safely stored, maybe upstairs in a place that's not going to be damaged if flooding were to occur? So think about how you would manage your own personal effects, but also think about whether there's a plan for your local area. So if a flood event was to occur, do you know where your safe place is to go and how to get there? And what about your neighbours and your friends? Are they aware of what might happen in a flood event? And are they aware of the plan that you've already gone and found out about? And do they know where to go? So there's lots of things you can think about in advance to make sure you're as prepared as you possibly can be if in the event that a flood should happen. Okay, so during a flood event then, it's really important to make sure that you listen to the alerts and the warnings that might be sent out by Natural Resources Wales, and that you follow the advice that's written in those plans that you've looked at already. And if the emergency services say, knock on your door and say it's time to evacuate your street or your house because we think a flood might occur, you need to be ready to go and follow their instructions. Really important that you do that. And then after an event, you know, it's really, really difficult recovering from flooding, and it really has an awful effect on people's lives for quite a long time, trying to get your houses and properties back to normal and how they were. And it can be quite a frightening experience for people. But one of the things that can help is to make sure that when you're recovering from a flood, you think about what would you have done differently, or what could you do differently to make it less frightening or unpleasant in the future. So, you know, did you have all the right things stored upstairs, and could the house be rebuilt in a way that is more resilient to flooding in the future? So lots of things to think about if you live in an area that's at flood risk. Okay, that's a bit of a long answer. Do we have another question?
From our work, we know that Wales has a temperate climate. How do you think climate change will impact on the Welsh flood events in Wales?
Yes, so I'm thinking about the coast then. So we know that sea level is rising. I imagine you've talked about that in the work that you've already done. And it's predicted to continue to rise over the next 80 or 100 years. And it might even start to rise more quickly than it is now. So that means that water levels are going up, and we think then that flooding events could happen more often. We think that storm events might happen at about the same frequency that they happen now. But if you imagine that they're happening on top of higher water levels, then the number of times that the waves could come crashing over a sea defence might happen more often, just because the tide isn't going out as far and it's coming in that little bit further. So we can see that over time we expect coastal flooding to probably get worse unless we invest in our sea defences to protect those sections of coast more than they are now. Brilliant. Next question.
What can we do to help protect ourselves from flooding and coastal climate change in the future?
Brilliant. Okay, so we talked about being aware and planning, haven't we? So I think those are really important things that we can do to protect ourselves. And when you guys grow up and you're looking to buy your own house, do you think you will buy one in an area that, you know, is it flooding or erosion risk, or do you think you'll think about living somewhere that is safer from those risks? And you are going to be well informed of where to go and find that information and make really good choices. So that's the long-term future for you guys, because you've had the opportunity to learn all about this stuff in school. But yeah, for now, go and have a look and find out some information from the different websites and really get yourself informed about what the risks are. And that's the best way to then help yourself plan. And next question.
Where can we find out more information about these topics?
Oh gosh, there is so much information out there, but obviously because I work for Natural Resources Wales, I'm going to say go to Natural Resources Wales's website. There's lots of information on flooding, how to prepare for flooding, risk, and we've got some new maps that we're working on that are on the website that explain your flood risk. And we'll be adding more information on there in the next few months about erosion risk as well. And obviously, it's really important to keep an eye on the Wales Coastal Monitoring Centre website, because that tells us about what change is happening now, and what we understand about change going back a few years as well. I'd also say places like the BBC website have some really great resources. So go and have a look there, because they have some really great videos and information on coastal management. But yeah, there's so much information out there, it can be quite difficult to know where to start, can't it? But good question, thank you.
Great, and I think that's all of our questions. What do we need to say for Year 5?
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, class. There were some excellent questions. I was so impressed. It just shows how hard you've been working on this. And thanks so much to Dr. Rimington, who gave us some brilliant answers. I learned a lot there. Thank you, everybody, and hopefully we can speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.